Thanks for joining us again on Inside the Philippines. The story we're sharing today might surprise you. The headline poses a simple question: is it really possible for a man to retire here on $2,000 a month and find love after 60? Brendan set out to find the answer. At 55, he's Irish, raised in Cork, and spent 32 years at sea as a second engineer on massive container ships, someone whose hands were more familiar with tools than loan payments. He lost his wife of 26 years to a sudden heart attack in their kitchen 18 months before this journey began. After months of sleepless nights, the TV on and a bottle never far, he started watching the same retirement videos many of you have probably seen. What I'll say now is this: Brendan's story has no villains. No secret lover, no hidden spouse, no scammer posing as a nurse from Cebu. The woman he met was genuine, she cared for him in her own way, and her family was as real as any. Yet he returned home with half his savings gone, a daughter barely speaking to him, and a gap in his finances the size of the boat he'd once dreamed of retiring on. This isn't the usual cautionary tale, it's quieter, harder to forget. So grab a drink, get comfortable, and listen. Here's Brendan in his own words, right, where to start. The real beginning, I suppose, not the one from those YouTube videos. I went to sea at 23, back in '93. Cork wasn't offering much then. Half my mates from school were off to England or America, but I had a cousin in Rotterdam who said Dutch shipping lines were hiring Irish engineers if you didn't mind the shifts. I didn't. Truth is, I didn't know what I'd mind, I was 23. So off I went. 32 years of it. Mostly container ships. The big ones. Rotterdam to Singapore, Singapore to Yokohama, through the Suez, all that. Worked my way up in the engine room, started as a fourth, ended as a second. The rungs on the ladders are worn smooth, ears don't pick up half what they once did, no matter what you stuff in them, the engines grind your hearing down in the end. There's a scent, thick with bunker fuel, bilge water, and the sweat of 9 other men crammed into a steel hull, that'll stay with me until the day I die, whether I like it or not. But the job was the job. It was my life. Myriad was my home. We met at 21, married at 25, and bought the place in Glanmire in '94 when she was already expecting Oif. Connor came 2 years later. And let me be clear, she raised those kids. I won't pretend otherwise, because when a man loses his wife, there's a pull to turn her into something flawless and himself into some kind of martyr. That wasn't us. I was gone 6, sometimes 7 months a year. She handled everything, the school runs, the doctor visits, the bills, the broken boiler, the time Oif snapped her arm on the trampoline, the mess Connor got into at 15. I'd come back, try to be a father for 8 weeks, then vanish again. Marriott held it all together, never once making me feel guilty for being away. She was, God, she was just decent. That's all. A genuinely decent person. And we had a plan, West Cork. We'd been saving since the kids were little. A quiet spot near Shoal. Nothing grand. 2 bedrooms, a view of roaring Water Bay. I'd planned to buy a small boat, nothing extravagant. Just a 16-foot day sailor for fishing mackerel, the kind of thing we'd take out when the grandkids visited during summer break. That was the extent of our dreams, we weren't after anything grand. But then she passed away on a Tuesday. I was 3 days into a voyage from Oman on the Maersk route when my phone rang at 4 in the morning, ship's time. It was Oifi, and I already knew before she spoke, you just sense these things. A massive heart attack in the kitchen. She was only 52. She'd been boiling water for tea when it happened, the kettle was still warm when Oifi found her. 52. It took me 8 days to make it back. A week had passed since she was laid to rest by the time I arrived. They'd held off as long as possible, but my presence wasn't an option. Take a moment to let that sink in, because I had no choice. My partner of 26 years and I never made it to her service, all because I'd been in the wrong stretch of ocean. What followed wasn't something I'll sugarcoat. The first half year, I was hollow. The next, I was worse. That house in Glanmire, you never notice how much noise someone fills a space with until they're gone. Our bed became unbearable. I dozed off on the sofa with the TV playing in the background. The drinking started early, before noon, and I was self-aware enough to recognize it, though not enough to cut back. The retirement forms arrived, but I left them unopened for nearly a month. My ex would visit when she had time, though her life was settled in Carrigaline by then, and our son had long since moved to Brisbane. He made the trip for the service but left right after. Hard to fault him for that. That's how I ended up scrolling through YouTube at 4 a.m., the laptop glowing in the dark. I'd been exploring the idea for a while by that point. You know how these recommendation systems work: watch one clip, and suddenly the platform thinks it's cracked your entire personality. I'd clicked on a single video about moving overseas, just to see what it was about. Within 2 weeks, my screen was flooded with guys lounging on shores, drinks in hand, insisting I could live like royalty on a modest budget. Some were clearly exaggerating. You develop an eye for that after enough time abroad, but a few seemed genuine, men with steady incomes like mine. And if I'm being honest, it wasn't the scenery or the lifestyle that hooked me at first. It was the quiet. The thought of any life that didn't involve sitting in that same house, counting the seconds on the hallway clock. Thailand was out immediately. Too many old shipmates had spun the same tales about the place, and I wasn't interested in reliving them. The Philippines, though, that kept popping up. English is their spoken language. They follow the Catholic faith. Though I'm not especially devout now, having been raised in the religion, I still find an inherent, unshakable comfort there. The living expenses appeared manageable in theory. And the videos, may God forgive me. They presented it as a feasible path for a man. So, one evening, around 11:30 p.m., after consuming a few whiskeys, I was seated at the kitchen table with my laptop and downloaded Christian Filipina. I assured myself it was purely for browsing. I only meant to browse, at least, that's what I told myself at first. It was the simplest deception, the one that made all the others that followed come more naturally. But I'm jumping ahead. That initial evening, I did nothing but scroll. No messages, no contact. A glass of whiskey sat next to the laptop, and I kept the Marriott's desk lamp on because the overhead light felt too harsh. For 2 hours, I scrolled through profiles before finally shutting the screen, the kind of unease that lingers like something you should scrub away. It wasn't what I'd imagined, or maybe it was, just uglier. There's a certain type of profile that appears first, and you recognize it instantly. At 23, the images were all shot in one room. The bio was brief, just 2 lines, one mentioning faith, the other searching for a committed partner. Within 24 hours of joining, I'd received 7 or 8 messages from women young enough to be my children, greeting me with, "Hey gorgeous," and checking in on my day. I ignored most, though I'll admit the thought of replying crossed my mind once or twice. I'm 55, not oblivious, but something about it left a bad taste. It felt like bait, the kind you toss into the water just to see what bites. So I adjusted my preferences, raising the age filter to 35, 50 and marking myself as widowed. The flood of attention dried up almost instantly. That was exactly what I wanted. Joy's profile appeared around 3 weeks later. At 41, she had 3 pictures, just one a self-portrait. The others showed her alone. In one, she stood at a lively gathering, surrounded by what appeared to be younger relatives. The second captured her on a beach, her hair pulled back, gaze turned away from the lens. In 2 of the photos, she wore a blue blouse fastened all the way up. Her profile mentioned she worked as a pharmacy aide in Bacolod City, that she had lost her spouse, and that her interests included strolls, faith, and books. She'd kept it simple, no emojis, no hint of searching for anyone. Just straightforward. And that's what struck me, she wasn't pretending to be younger. The silver at her temples was natural, untouched by dye. The creases around her eyes deepened when she laughed, and she carried herself like a woman who knew exactly who she was. The idea of authenticity meant more to me than I'd realized. I never reached out first, she did. And her message was one I still recall exactly. "Hi, Brendan. You're from Ireland, right? Is it really true the rain blows sideways there?" My cousin lived in Limerick, and he swore it did, but I can't even imagine it. Just that. No playful banter. No striking looks. Just a simple remark about the damn rain. I chuckled at the table, actually laughed out loud. It had been 18 months since I'd laughed like that, and here I was, amused by a stranger asking if the rain was coming in sideways. I replied an hour later, confirming it did, and sometimes even shot upward when the wind hit just right. I told her about a January in Killybugs where the rain seemed to rise from the harbor, lashing at you from below. She responded the next morning, and that was that. No rush, no pressure. We exchanged messages for nearly 2 weeks before our first video call, and even then, her sister was there in the background, hunched over a sewing machine. I caught her glancing up mid-conversation, waving before going back to her work. After that, the calls became routine. Every 7 days at the start, then more often, twice a week, then almost nightly during her evenings, which fell around noon for me. She'd step outside the pharmacy on her break, perched on a flimsy plastic chair, while tricycles rattled past and someone belted out karaoke from the other side of the street. Always karaoke. I'd later realize it never stops in the Philippines. Someone's always butchering a power ballad within earshot, no matter the hour. She mentioned her husband. Roderick. A fisherman from one of Negro's small harbors. He'd set out one morning in 2018 and never returned. The boat came back empty, they never recovered his body. She told me this on a Tuesday, her voice steady, no tears, just the quiet resignation of someone repeating a story they've told too many times before. I recognized that tone. I'd been rehearsing it myself, whispering Mired's name in the pharmacy aisle or at the gas pump. We compared notes on the funerals we'd skipped and the ones we wished we could have. The distinct hum of a kitchen has its own story. And then there were the silly conversations. She assumed the Irish lived on potatoes, and I didn't correct her, let her hold on to that idea a little longer. I showed her a picture of the local chip shop, and she replied with a photo of a cheerful street vendor in Bacolod, asking if we had anything like it in Cork. I told her no. Her response, "You're missing out, Brendan, the chicken is perfectly crispy." Around a month and a half later, a package arrived. I still think about it more than I probably should. It came in a small, padded brown envelope from Bacolod, the customs label marking its worth at roughly €2. Inside was a delicate wooden rosary, the beads so tiny they could have been peppercorns, and a folded note. Her mother had taken it to their parish church to be blessed, she wrote, hoping it would bring me comfort and remind me someone remembered me. That was all. No requests, no subtle hints, nothing. She didn't even mention it the next time we spoke until I did. When I did, she simply smiled and said, "Oh, good. It's here." She acted as if it were no big deal. I slipped it into my pocket. Believe it or not, it's still there now. Different pocket, different pants, but it always travels with me. I told my daughter I was going on vacation. That was the cover story for a mission. I told a whiff, "Look, I need to escape. I'm heading to the Philippines for 6 weeks. I plan to take a trip to clear my mind." I left out the part about joy, didn't mention the months of video chats or that I'd already bought a one-way ticket, leaving the return date up in the air. I told a weef 6 weeks, since that sounded reasonable enough not to raise suspicion. Still, she gave me that look, the one that asked, "Are you really doing this?" I just nodded. What else could she say? It wasn't like she could stop me. I traveled with just one bag. The rosary tucked into my coat's inner pocket. The journey took me from Cork to Heathrow, then Heathrow to Doha, and finally Doha to Cebu, 26 hours from door to door. The last time I'd flown for fun was back in 1989, when Mairead and I went to the Canaries. I was a mess then, two whiskeys down in the Heathrow bar at 8 in the morning, and the kid behind the counter didn't even flinch. Bless him. We touched down in Cebu at 11:15 at night, and stepping out of Mactan Cebu International was like stepping into an open oven. 28 degrees, 90% humidity, even at midnight. My shirt was plastered to my skin before I'd even reached the taxi stand. The air was thick with jet fuel, frangipani, and the scent of something frying nearby. She was waiting at the barrier with Maritz, her older sister. They held up a handwritten sign, biro on the back of a cereal box, with Brenda O'Sullivan misspelled in both names. I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in 2 years. Joy looked at me, and her face crumpled. She just stood there crying while I let my bag fall and wrapped my arms around her. Maritz patted my shoulder, repeating welcome, welcome, welcome. I could smell Joy's hair, coconut and maybe soap, and the arrivals hall's air conditioning sent a chill through the sweat on my back. Somewhere, a child was wailing, and a recorded voice droned in Tagalog about unattended luggage. Outside, we squeezed into a tricycle, the three of us jammed into the sidecar with my bag balanced on our knees. Joy sat between us, Maritz by the airport side. Joy's hand settled over mine on the bag's handle, no grip, no pressure, just resting there. As we pulled away from Mactan toward Lapu-Lapu, the warm wind rushed past my face, and the tricycle's diesel engine roared louder than any machine I'd worked beside in years. In that moment, I thought, Christ, this might actually be real. I'm telling you this part honestly because everything that followed has to be weighed against it. I wasn't some naive Mark walking into a trap. I was a man stepping into something that, right then, felt like the first honest thing in 18 months. By the time I turned 55, should I have known better? That's a question for later. My initial reservation was at a budget hotel close to the airport, 3 nights, just enough to settle in and find my footing. Joy and Maritz brought me there around midnight, but Joy refused to come inside. That moment stuck with me. Truthfully, I'd sort of hoped she would, and I'd even steeled myself for the inevitable polite refusal. Instead, she just leaned in, kissed my cheek in the lobby, and said, "Get some rest, Brendan. We'll see you in the morning." Then they rode off on the trike. I didn't sleep a wink. I stretched out on the bed. The air. Would you believe you could live like royalty here on $2,000 a month? Drop a comment below if you take the leap, I'll tell you all the secrets I've learned. Conditioning clattering away, while a nearby karaoke bar belted out what seemed like every Whitney Houston track ever made. The familiar chorus of "I Will Always Love You" drifted over, followed by someone shouting at nearly 3 in the morning. Just another night in the Philippines. Within days, I began searching for a place to stay. My budget had only accounted for a hotel for 2 weeks at most. Decent hotels in Cebu cost around 3,500 pesos a night, about 57 euros, and the expenses piled up quickly. Joy showed me a few options her aunt had recommended, and we settled on a 1-bedroom condo in Mactan Newtown, Lapu-Lapu City. The ocean was barely visible, just a sliver if you leaned over the balcony and tilted your head to the side. The bedroom had reliable air conditioning, and the unit was within a short walk of a modest SM mall. Located on the 25th floor, the monthly rent was 35,000 pesos, around 570 euros, which, back home on a 30-year mortgage, would have barely secured a cramped, damp studio in Manchester. I felt like the deal was worth it. I put down 2 months' rent up front along with a security deposit, totaling 105,000 pesos, roughly 1,720 euros. That's just moving costs, I told myself. Anyone relocating has those initial expenses. But Joy didn't actually move in, let me make that clear. Her aunt, her mother's sister, lived in a smaller condo in Mactan, just 20 minutes away, and Joy stayed there instead. She'd arrive in the mornings, and we'd sit on the balcony with coffee, watching planes descend over the water. She'd prepare breakfast each morning, whipping up a hearty sinangag, garlic rice topped with a crispy fried egg. The rice itself came from a small bag she'd carried all the way from Bacolod, insisting Cebu's version just didn't compare. Then, around 9 or 10 every evening, she'd kiss me goodbye and head back to her aunt's place. This went on night after night for nearly a month and a half. It meant something. More than I can explain, it still does. All the online chatter about the Philippines had led me to expect something entirely different, a girl who'd move in by the 3rd day and start hinting about appliances by the 5th. Joy was resting in the extra bedroom at her aunt's place. When I brought it up during our 3rd week together, she seemed uneasy and muttered something about not wanting the neighbors to get the wrong idea, then trailed off, making a face instead of finishing. I let it drop. The religious traditions in the Philippines aren't just for show, people take them seriously, whether you do or not. That first Sunday, we went to Mass at the Archdiocesan Shrine of Santo Niño in Cebu City. The grab ride from Lapu-Lapu took nearly an hour with traffic. I hadn't stepped inside a church since my wife's confirmation back in 2014. We sat there, Joy beside me, the air thick with heat. The place was open on all sides, giant ceiling fans spinning like helicopter blades above us. Hundreds of people filled the space, kids darting around, candles flickering everywhere. During the prayers of the faithful, Joy silently spoke her mother's name in her mind. Or at least, I'm pretty sure she did. Later, she admitted it. I prayed for your wife, she told me. I asked God to tell her you're looking after yourself. What do you even say to that? What's a person supposed to do with something like that? Then she started calling me my Brendan. Not just Brendan, my Brendan. The way she said it reminded me of Marriott. She used to call me my fool. Not in a cruel way. Just the way the Irish do. You'd forget your own skull if it weren't screwed tight, and Joy couldn't have guessed, but my heart still dropped the same way. I won't lie, it lightened the load a little. After about a month, we took a flight to Bacolod to see her family, Cebu Pacific, 4,200 pesos round trip for both of us. An hour in the air, then we touched down at Bacolod Cili, caught a jeepney into town, and hopped on a tricycle out to the barangay where her folks lived. The road went from smooth pavement to craters to dirt in under 20 minutes. Sugar cane stretched on both sides, Negros thrives on it, the whole island does, and the heat here was different from Cebu's, drier, dustier, with the faint scent of burning cane drifting from somewhere far off. The house, I need to get this right because it sets the stage for what followed. The front 2/3 were concrete blocks, the back 1/3 bamboo and corrugated metal where the kitchen sat. A tin roof, a cracked concrete slab out front with a sun-bleached plastic chair. 2 rooms split by a curtain. 10 people lived there, Joy's parents, her brother and his wife, their 2 kids, Maritas's husband, Maritas herself was still in Cebu, Cherry May, the youngest sister, and a cousin who just existed, the way relatives do in families like that. No one could quite pin down whose son he actually was. Her father was on the porch when we arrived. Tatay, they all called him. He stood to shake my hand, and I saw his left foot, missing the big toe and the one next to it, the bandage fresh, the sharp tang of antiseptic in the air. Diabetic ulcers, the kind that never close. His skin had that ashen tone I'd seen on some of the older crewmen on ships. The man was 63 but looked 75. Next to him on the table was a plastic bag stuffed with 8 different pill bottles, labels faded, and a glucose monitor that had clearly seen better days. Let me be straight, this wasn't some tale. The diabetes was real. The missing toes were real. This wasn't just some minor ailment. As an engineer, I've witnessed severe ulcers on ship cooks, so I recognize the gravity of a genuine case. Nane, the mother, approached me, cradling my face in both her hands. She began to weep uncontrollably, her hands still on my cheeks, repeating, "Salamat, Salamat Sir Brendan, you are a blessing from God to our family." I stood there, a small woman holding my face, surrounded by 9 strangers I'd only just met. Unsure how to react, I awkwardly patted her shoulder and mumbled, "Oh, no, no, it's fine, it's fine." I realize now that wasn't the most appropriate thing to say, but it was all I could manage at the moment. They had prepared a feast for me, lakhon manak, a chicken cooked over coals out back, served with rice, pancit, and a large bowl of sinigang. The brother continuously offered me San Miguel beers. After the meal, Cherry May, the youngest, sang me a song. I can't recall the tune, only that it was an earnest American piece. The entire village seemed to wander in and out of the front yard, curious to see the kano Joy had brought home. Not a single person asked me for anything, not one thing. 3 days later, on our return flight to Cebu, Joy remained silent, gazing out the window for the entire journey. Once we arrived at the condo, she settled onto the couch. After a significant pause, she spoke very softly, "Brendan, Papa's prescriptions. I believe we only have enough for 1 more week, and after that, we're unsure. Maritz and I typically share, but she's also facing difficulties right now. She never sought my permission. That detail matters, I need to be clear. She didn't ask. She simply stated what was needed, then let the quiet linger. I broke it with, 'How much?' Her answer came, 20,000 for a month, covering everything, them and the supplies. That same evening, I sent 25,000 pesos through Gcash, roughly 410 euros. The extra was intentional, a small cushion. She wept then, messy and unguarded, her face buried in a dishcloth. Over the following 2.5 months, more payments followed. An 8,000 peso hospital bill when his blood sugar spiraled out of control. 15,000 more for a replacement glucose monitor after the old one started giving false readings. I double-checked it against my own. I'm pre-diabetic myself, not that you asked. Years of feeding merchant marine crews will do that. Another 12,000 for the round trip. Bus to Bacolod City when he needed to see the specialist. By the end of the 3rd month, I'd wired nearly 180,000 pesos, around 2,950 euros, in small, scattered payments. And I kept telling myself this was exactly what Marriott would have done if it had been my father. Here's the exact thought I repeated, "Brendan, you spent 32 years providing for your family by being gone. Now you've got the chance to care for one by being here. This is how it should have been the first time." And I meant it. I wanted to believe it, because in some ways, it really was true. The issue wasn't the logic, it was that I wasn't thinking about the logic at all. I was just trying to be helpful. After nearly a year and a half of drifting through my own home like a shadow, the idea of usefulness, of feeling truly present, began to feel almost tangible. Joy arrived at the apartment around the 7th month. There was no formal discussion, no grand announcement, she simply started staying over more often, first a night or 2, then 3, then 4, until her bag was permanently in the bedroom and a second toothbrush appeared beside mine. That was all it took. Her aunt seemed unbothered, the Catholic neighbors stopped whispering, and I suspect the truth was that we'd both reached the same unspoken conclusion, the way people do after loss, you stop acting like life is endless, and you just let the toothbrush stay. What I want you to understand about that time is the quiet satisfaction of it. If I only mention the money, you might assume I was unhappy, but I wasn't. For the first time in nearly 2 years, I slept soundly beside someone, the kind of sleep that comes without effort. The drinking tapered off without me even noticing. I'd swap half a bottle of whiskey at 4 in the afternoon for a single San Miguel with dinner. Joy cooked. Real Filipino dishes, adobo sharp with vinegar, just like her mother's, sinigang on damp evenings, pancit every Sunday. We'd eat on the balcony as planes descended over Mactan and distant karaoke drifted up from the street below. And I'd think, yeah, this is enough. The household embraced me completely. I need to describe this because it's something outsiders often misunderstand, and I didn't fully grasp it myself until I was immersed in it. Within 2 weeks, I wasn't just Joy's friend anymore, I'd become Tito Brendan. The brother's children addressed me that way. Maritz used the name when she phoned. Cherry May did the same. Even Nanai began calling me Anak, meaning son, a whole different level of closeness. The cousin with the unclear family ties started referring to me as Tito Bren, dropping the Dan, which I actually preferred. Then there was the Facebook group chat I was abruptly added to, packed with 23 members. Messages flooded in non-stop, snapshots of meals, random updates, the kind of constant buzz that made it clear I'd been folded into the fold. Prayer updates filled the group. Chat, someone's kid running a temperature, a perfectly roasted lechin, a cousin acing a test. After a week, I silenced the alerts but still checked in now and then, tapping a quick thumbs up on a few posts, just like Tito Brendan was expected to. None of this reached Awafai's ears. That's worth highlighting. My daughter in Karigaline had asked over the phone how I was settling in, and I'd brushed it off, all grand, the weather's wild, the food's great, skipping the fact that I'd somehow become an unofficial uncle to 9 people in a barangay near Bacolod. Some instinct already knew that wasn't a talk I was ready for, though I didn't realize what that hesitation meant. The first major ask didn't come from Joy. That's the detail I need you to catch. It arrived from Maritz, in a call on a Saturday morning. Joy called and requested to speak with me, something that rarely happened. She stepped onto the balcony to ensure I had some privacy, another uncommon gesture. Maritz sounded uneasy during the conversation, repeatedly apologizing. She kept saying how sorry she was to bring it up, Tito. The situation involved Cherry May, the youngest sister, the one who had sung me that American song. She was 19, intelligent, and had earned the grades needed for nursing at a private college in Bacolod City. Public schools had no available slots, with waiting lists stretching 3 years. The only viable option was a private institution, where the annual tuition amounted to 220,000 pesos, roughly 3,600 euros. Maritz and her husband were already covering Tatai's medical expenses. Joy didn't have those funds, nor did the brother living with them. They had almost resigned themselves to Cherry May not being able to attend at all. So there I was, finally at that moment. And, as expected, she didn't come right out and ask. None of them ever did, that was just how it worked. I agreed almost instantly, in under a minute. To be truthful, I didn't hesitate at all. I just told Maritz to share the school's account information so I could handle the payment myself. I settled the amount through a direct transfer. It gave me a sense of satisfaction. I wasn't passing money to an individual, but to the organization itself. This was structured giving, done the proper way. The sum, roughly 3,600 euros, 220,000 pesos, moved straight from my Bank of Ireland account to the school's finance office in Bacolod, or wherever their main campus was located. That night, Cherry May called me over video, her family gathered around her. She was in tears, and so was her mother. His brother, though trying to compose himself, also had tears in his eyes. They were carrying a banner. It was a homemade banner, fashioned from a bed sheet with markers, bearing the words, "Thank you, Tito Brendan. God bless you." As they lifted it high, Cherry May declared, "Tito, I will dedicate myself to my studies. I will ensure you are proud of me. I will pursue a career as a nurse, and I pledge, on the Bible, to repay you." Sitting there in the Lapu-Lapu condo, with Joy by my side, I found myself reflecting, and truthfully, I must admit that I hadn't felt this sense of purpose in 2 decades. My time with the crew on the ships never gave me that feeling. My children never made me feel that way, I was too absent to understand what they truly needed. But this young woman in a small sugarcane town was pursuing nursing because of me. Marriott would have been moved. Pause for a moment and consider that sensation, because that's the real danger. The danger isn't some attractive teenager asking for a phone, it's hearing at 55 that you mean something to people who depend on you. That kind of realization drains your bank account quicker than anything else I've experienced. The issue with the house surfaced about 3 weeks after Cherry May's school fees were settled. Her brother, Joel, I should mention, since I keep forgetting their names, they all started blending together, sent me a series of photos over Messenger. There was the family home's roof, leaking, with a bucket on the floor collecting water. The bamboo wall behind the kitchen had gaps where sunlight streamed through. A child's mattress, ruined by mold after the rainy season. Joy didn't even try to persuade me, she just let me glance at the images over her shoulder as she scrolled. When I asked, she exhaled and said the rainy season was always like this, each year worse than the last. They were saving bit by bit, but it might take 3 or 4 years before they could afford a proper roof. 3 or 4 years of that house, with Tat's foot deteriorating and 2 kids sleeping on a damp mattress. I asked how much a full repair would cost. Joel was on the line in under 10 minutes, he'd clearly been waiting. The total came to 400,000 pesos, roughly 6,550 euros, enough to fix the roof, replace the bamboo with concrete blocks, and install proper drainage. I asked for a written estimate. Within an hour, he sent one from a contractor in Bacolod City. It looked genuine. I'd overseen enough ship renovations to recognize a fair estimate when I saw one. Without hesitation, I agreed. It was a major but necessary expense, 400,000 pesos, roughly 6,550 euros. I transferred the funds to Joel's account immediately, as the contractor required. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe and maybe you'll be the one I bring over for a month on me. Imagine finding love, or at least a killer sunset, at 60. The payment up front for supplies. Work began soon after. Joel kept me updated with photos every few days, the old roof stripped away, progress unfolding. The installation of the rafters and the new metal roofing took on an unexpected momentum once the builders arrived. Within 3 weeks, a message from Joel arrived. Turns out, the contractor had lifted the flooring in one room and discovered the supports beneath were decayed. The entire rear of the house was shifting, and without repairs, the new roof would likely split within a year. The fix would cost an additional 180,000 pesos, roughly 2,950 euros. I agreed. While reinforcing the foundation, the contractor mentioned it would only take another 120,000 pesos, around 1,970 euros, to add a modest extra bedroom at the back. This way, the brothers' 2 children wouldn't have to sleep on the main room's floor. I gave the go-ahead. Then came the request for a proper bathroom, one with running water and a flush toilet. For 30 years, the family had relied on a basic outdoor setup, and Joy had casually mentioned one Sunday how her mother's knees were struggling with the long trek, especially in the rain. The upgrade would be 150,000 pesos, about 2,460 euros. I said yes. Next, Nene was proposed as a candidate to run a small sari-sari store at the front of the house. Nearly every barangay in the Philippines has one, those tiny wooden stalls selling single sachets of shampoo, instant coffee, and cigarettes. A sturdy concrete storefront with shelves and a counter would cost 250,000 pesos, roughly 4,100 euros. Joy's argument, which I think she sincerely believed, was that the store would bring in income, making the family less reliant on me in the long run. I agreed to that as well. By the 11th month, I'd invested 1.1 million pesos, around 18,000 euros, into the project. That was money I'd been saving for 30 years, originally meant for a different house in West Cork, one with a view of Roaring Water Bay. Here's the truth, there was an afternoon in the 9th month, before the bathroom was finished, when I was sitting on the balcony in Lapu-Lapu. I'd been reading about Filipino customs somewhere online. Utang na loob, the debt of gratitude. The belief that a kindness creates a lifelong obligation. The eldest daughter carries the weight of her entire family. The OFW culture, where over 2 million Filipinos labor abroad solely to support those back home, and how a foreign husband is just another breadwinner in the family's eyes. I absorbed all of that, let it sink in, and told myself I finally understood. I was an adult, making this choice with full awareness. But I hadn't. Not really. I'd read about it the way you skim a weather report for a place you've never visited. I hadn't calculated what it truly meant for my own life. I knew I was stepping into the role of a Tito. What I didn't realize was that the role was for life. I never called my wife. Not a single time during those months. I sent her pictures of the ocean and meals. Never the house. Never Cherry May. The $18,000 was never the issue. Every couple of weeks, she'd call, and I'd step onto the balcony so Joy wouldn't overhear. I'd mutter something about the weather being wild, then end the call, left with a hollow feeling in my stomach for the next 10 minutes. That's what gnaws at me the most, not the money, but the deception. The numbers I could justify, the lies to my daughter I'd have to carry forever. By the 12th month, the house was done. There was a small gathering, just the parish priest blessing the doorways, no tears over the new sorry counter. Photos went up on the family's Facebook, everyone lined up outside. I wasn't in them. I'd promised to be there but backed out last minute, claiming a stomach bug. The truth? I couldn't stand being the outsider in those pictures. Joy went without me and brought back a Tupperware of leftovers. I'd convinced myself the demands would ease once the house was finished. New home, stable sorry income, Cherry May's tuition covered, Tata's meds paid, we've cleared the worst of it now. Just normal life from here. But the requests didn't stop. They just shifted. The first came 2 weeks after the house was done. Joel, the brother, had run into trouble at the cane mill, something about a supervisor and a dispute over hours. Whatever the details, he was out of work, with a wife and 2 kids in the new house Tito Brendan had built. Joy brought it up one morning over breakfast, soft as always. Joel's been thinking, with his hands, he could drive a tricycle. There's a route in the barangay that needs filling. The last driver retired. Good money in it, weddings, school runs, the market. A new tricycle in Bacolod costs 90,000 pesos, about 1470 euros. Secondhand's a money pit, she said. You'd be fixing them constantly. I asked how much for a new one. She told me. I said I'd think about it. A day and a half later, I sent the money. Investment, I told myself. Joel could make 600 pesos a day, 10 euros. That covers their food. Less pressure on me long term. Same reasoning as the store. Same reasoning as the tuition. I want you to see the cycle. Because I didn't, until I was already in the air. Each new demand carried a promise, this one would cut down on future asks. None ever did. Instead, they only paved the way for the next, arriving like clockwork 2 weeks later. Then came Joel's oldest, a boy around 13, who needed a laptop for virtual lessons. The school had shifted to a mix of in-person and online classes, and the textbooks were locked behind a login portal. A decent model at National Bookstore in Bacolod ran 35,000 pesos, roughly 570 euros. I wired the money. The kid sent back a clip of himself unboxing it, all wide-eyed and proper. Thank you, Tito Brendan. I'll work hard. God, he looked just like my own Connor at that age. Some distant relative of Joy's, one I'd never even met. A case in Iloilo, dengue, the dangerous hemorrhagic type. The hospital call came around 11 p.m., and Joy was in tears before she even hung up. The private hospital bill hit 60,000 pesos, roughly 980 euros. I wired the money within the hour. The cousin survived. A thank you message arrived 2 weeks later, courtesy of an aunt's older sister, someone I vaguely recalled from election. Dinner years back. Then there was the cataract surgery for another relative, 45,000 pesos, about 735 euros. That's just the start. The financial strain piled up from month 11 to 13, on top of household costs, the condo, and Joy's monthly allowance, which I hadn't even factored in yet. She received 20,000 pesos a month from me, around 330 euros, earmarked for personal needs like clothes, toiletries, and trips home. Then, over an 8-week stretch, another 230,000 pesos, nearly 3,770 euros, vanished. Two major events stood out in that period. The first. Joy quit her job at the pharmacy. By her first-year mark, she approached me and mentioned the manager had been pressuring her over her availability. Personal obligations kept forcing her to skip shifts. She wondered if stepping back might be the right move. I asked if she was certain, after nearly a decade there. She nodded, saying, "Brendan, my family needs me more now, and you're handling things." I didn't argue. I'd spent years urging my own wife to leave her career, but Mariah had always resisted. Yet here was someone choosing family without hesitation, and I convinced myself it was beautiful. The actual situation was that I was now responsible for her time, all 24 hours of it, each day. A second development occurred. Nanai began referring to me as Anak more frequently. Anak translates to son. Previously, she had addressed me as Sir Brendan or Kuya, the term for an older brother. This shift to Anak felt like a significant advancement. The initial occasion she used the term during a video conversation, I experienced a warmth in my chest but didn't dwell on its significance. Subsequently, during a different call, she softly conveyed, "My Anak, your cousin Marisol, Joy's first cousin, who resides in Manila, is scheduled to marry next March. She lacks a wedding sponsor for the ceremony. It would mean so much if my child could take on that role." In Filipino weddings, a sponsor isn't the same as a Western godparent. They serve as both a financial backer and a mark of prestige. Their name appears in the program, they stand at the altar, and they're expected to contribute a meaningful gift. When I asked, Joy mentioned the standard amount was around 30,000 pesos, roughly 490 euros. For a relative I'd never even met, I agreed without hesitation. Naturally, I agreed without hesitation. By that point, saying yes had become almost automatic. My response slipped out before I even considered refusing. The third incident, though, is the one that stands out. Around the 13th week, my Irish phone rang. A woman from Bank of Ireland's fraud team was on the line, young, probably in her mid-20s, and speaking with deliberate care. She addressed me by name and mentioned they'd detected a series of unusual international transfers to the Philippines over the past year. Then she asked if I'd approved them. They confirmed it was approved, I replied. She responded that they simply needed to verify, given the transactions matched a fraud profile they track. I assured her it wasn't fraud, just family. She acknowledged that, then offered to remove the alerts if I preferred. I told her yes, that would be best. After ending the call, I stayed in the condo for nearly 20 minutes, gripped by an emotion I couldn't quite place. The bank employee had briefly let me see the situation differently, but I dismissed it too quickly. Maybe I should have let the moment linger. I need to make something perfectly clear. I never once believed Joy was deceiving me. Still, I went through her phone one time. I'm not proud of it. Not at all. I'm a man from Cork, married for 26 years to a woman who never once made me question her loyalty. Yet there I was, snooping through her messages while she showered. Nothing suspicious turned up, no hidden lover, no secret life. The app had no private conversations, just endless family threads, church circles, and what seemed like prayer requests for ailing relatives. A wave of guilt hit me for snooping, though I never admitted it. The real issue wasn't Joy, it was the creeping realization, in those sleepless nights, that family was an endless well, and my resources weren't. There'd always be another aunt, another cousin, another urgent need, not because they were exploiting me, but because there were dozens of them and only one of me, the sole person with an Irish bank account. Night after night, I'd tally rough figures in my head, 25 here, 35 there, for prescriptions, Joy's expenses, the mortgage. Then the irregular costs, spread out over time. The exact total eluded me, and that's what terrified me. I'd once calculated fuel for massive cargo ships down to the last drop, yet I couldn't account for a year's worth of support to my family. One Tuesday, Joy left for the Save More at the base of the building to grab groceries, giving me an hour alone. I waited until the elevator descended, then pulled out the laptop. Logging into my bank account, I found a spiral notebook left by the previous tenant, blue cover, half-used. I flipped it open. With a few clicks, I pulled up 12 months of statements. And I began writing everything down. That's when the next part of this story truly began, me, on a quiet morning, finally doing what I should have done a year earlier. The first attempt took nearly 40 minutes. I went month by month, statement by statement, jotting down every transfer over €1,000 and every cluster of smaller ones. On a separate page, I copied the Gcash transactions. The numbers stared back at me, raw and undeniable. I compared the wire transfers sent to Joel for the property against the dates the contractor was supposed to bill us. As an engineer, I approach everything methodically, break it down, sum it up, verify it. By the time I heard the elevator rising, I'd tallied the total, €34,000. I shut my laptop, tucked the notebook beneath the sofa cushion, and Joy walked in carrying 2 bags from Save More. She asked if I wanted pancit for lunch, and I said sure, that sounded great. I ate without really looking at her. Later that night, after she'd gone to sleep, I pulled the notebook out again and recalculated. The first sum had come to €33,750. The second was €34,210, turns out I'd overlooked a few minor Gcash payments the first time. I settled on €34,000, underlined it firmly, and stared at the figure. It was half of what Marriott and I had saved since $1,995 for a modest home near Shul. Vanished in just over a year. What the ledger didn't show was just as telling. No evidence of deception emerged. No hidden funds turned up in my search. No record of Joy splurging on a luxury SUV, or Joel skipping out on the promised construction. Every cent I'd wired, as far as I could trace, had funded something tangible, genuine medicine, actual school fees, a legitimate sack of concrete, a proper hospital cot. The builder's estimates had been accurate. Cherry May was enrolled in nursing school. Tatai's injury hadn't deteriorated. Joy hadn't taken anything. I need to emphasize that so you don't leave here believing she stole from me. She didn't. What really happened? The part that took me 3 weeks to process was simply the numbers. Next, I reviewed my pension. For months, I'd convinced myself I was receiving €2,200 monthly, but after Irish tax on the merchant marine portion, the real amount was closer to €1,800. On paper, the gap isn't huge, but it becomes massive when you've been spending €2,400 a month while assuming you were only €200 over budget. Meanwhile, the condo's HOA fees had risen twice during my time there, first from 4,500 pesos to 5,200, then to 6,800, due to the building installing new elevators, adding roughly another €120 a month I hadn't accounted for. At 4 a.m., with Joy sleeping soundly beside me, I scribbled the calculations on a scrap of paper. At my current spending rate, pension, family expenses, condo fees, Joy's allowance, and whatever unexpected costs came next, my savings would be depleted before I turned 60. After that, my pension wouldn't even cover Joy's monthly stipend and Tatai's medication, let alone the next relative's medical bills. I wouldn't be retiring in the Philippines on $2,000 a month. I'd be a charity case waiting on Cherry May to graduate and start sending money home, which given the way Filipino nursing pay actually works was a fairy story I'd been telling myself, and there was nothing to do about it. That was the cleanest, hardest bit. There was no villain to confront, no deception to expose, no moment where I could go to Joy and say, right, that's it, you've been caught, because she hadn't been caught at anything. She'd been Joy. She'd been the eldest daughter in a Filipino family with a sick father and a bright sister and a leaky roof and a foreign boyfriend with a Bank of Ireland account. From inside her culture, she had not done a single thing wrong. From inside mine, I'd let myself forget how to do basic subtraction. I went through it again over the next 3 weeks. I'd wait until Joy was asleep. She slept like a child, on her side, one hand under her cheek. And I'd take the laptop out to the balcony with the notebook. And I'd add things up. I made a sheet. Monthly fixed costs. Monthly variable costs. Initial capital outlays. Love stories, budget hacks, or just curious about retiring here? Ask me anything in the comments, I've got the answers and the coffee to go with them. Forecasts for 12, 24, and 36 months. I created a separate sheet for the remaining items. Another page simply read, next steps, at the top, blank below. No one knew. I didn't call my spouse. I didn't reach out to my brother Donald in Limerick. I didn't share anything on the expat discussion board. I spent those days alone, as I always do. The crew on the ships used to tease me for it, how I'd vanish into my own thoughts for weeks at a stretch. This time, I'd retreated to a small condo in Lapu-Lapu, flipping through a notebook left behind by the last tenant. That Sunday, I went to Mass by myself, telling Joy I had a headache. I sat in the back of the Santo Niño shrine, fingers wrapped around the rosary in my pocket, peppercorn beads blessed by her mother in some parish I'd never visited. I wasn't praying, just listening to the Tagalog, the priest switching between English and Cebuano. Somewhere between the consecration and the Our Father, a rare clarity hit me. Mariette would have done exactly what Joy was doing if it had been my mother fading in that damp house. She would have fought tooth and nail to get her help. The difference? Mariette's family was small, just 3 people. Joy's 40, all within a quick ride of each other, bound by obligation that never ends. I'm not being taken advantage of, I'm being pulled into a way of life that doesn't let go. The only way out without being the villain is to walk away. I cried for the first time since the funeral, silently, surrounded by strangers. I wiped my face with my sleeve, left, and took a grab back to Lapu-Lapu. Joy made me Nescafe and asked how Mass was. I said it was fine. We sat on the balcony, watching planes land. Later, on a Wednesday, I took her to Abaca, a cafe on the road to Mactan, nice spot, good coffee, mostly expats, run by Filipinos. I'd asked her out, just the 2 of us, and I think she knew what was coming. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, the way she did when bracing herself. I didn't soften it. I never could, not even at my best, and certainly not when I was trying not to fall apart in front of someone I loved. Joy, I said, I need to go back home for a while. Things with my wife, the house, there are things I have to deal with. I don't know how long it'll take. I'm telling you straight. She nodded. She didn't cry. What nearly shattered me was her lack of tears. She simply held my gaze for what felt like forever. Then she asked, "Will you return, Brendan?" I told her, "I can't say, darling. Truly, I can't." She replied, "All right. I'll pray for you." There was no hesitation in her voice, no empty reassurance, just quiet sincerity. I knew she meant it then, and I still do now. That night, I confirmed my itinerary, Cebu to Doha, then Heathrow, and finally Cork, 24 hours in transit. Joy assisted with my packing, carefully folding my shirts the way her mother had taught her brother, first in thirds, then in half. She placed the wooden rosary on top of the stack in my suitcase herself, even though I'd already taken it from my coat pocket to set it there. Maritz arrived from Cebu City to say goodbye, and both she and Joy accompanied me to Mactan Cebu International Airport that Thursday afternoon. The ride there was subdued, the tricycle driver had the radio playing some Bisaya talk show, and no one said much. At the departure gate, Maritz embraced me and whispered, "Thank you, Tito Brendan, for everything. You'll always be family." Joy was the last to hug me, holding on longer than I anticipated. She released her grip and rested her palm against my chest, slipping something flat into the breast pocket of my shirt. Her voice was quiet as she told me not to open it yet, wait until I was in the air. I passed through security, settled into the gate area, and kept my word. Even after boarding, even as the plane rolled down the runway, I didn't look. Only when the captain announced we were over the South China Sea, the city lights fading behind us and McTan a distant glow to the right, did I unfold the note. It was lined notebook paper, folded into quarters, written in her neat, rounded script. My Brendan, no matter what you choose, I'm thankful, you gave my father 2 more years, and my sister a future. If you don't return, I'll understand. If you do, I'll be here. Either way, you're not alone. I love you. Joy. No demands, no guilt, no strings, just that. I read it 3 times before tucking it back into my pocket, next to the rosary. Sitting in seat 34A on the Qatar Airways flight to Doha, I cried for the second time in as many weeks, silently, my face turned toward the window so the woman beside me wouldn't notice. We landed, and I spent the 4-hour layover staring at the back of a Costa Coffee, trying to imagine what version of myself would step off the next plane in Cork. November in Cork has a way of sneaking up on you, soft rain slanting off the river, streetlights glowing early, everyone bundled in coats. I disembarked at 4 in the afternoon, the sky already dim, the air thick with the scent of peat smoke and wet asphalt. Standing at the taxi rank with my single suitcase and the rosary in my pocket, I thought, this is home. Whatever that means now. The Glanmire house was untouched. That was the part that nearly undid me. 15 months, that's how long I'd been gone. 15 months. And yet Marriott's coat still hung by the door. The kettle sat in the same spot on the counter. The framed picture of the 4 of us from my wife's confirmation still hung in the hallway. I'd braced for layers of dust, but Awifa had been stopping by every 2 weeks with the spare key to freshen the place, credit to her. The fridge held just 1 pint of milk she'd left that morning, nothing more. I didn't call her the first night. Instead, I sat in the dark kitchen, rain tapping the window, sipping water, not whiskey, a promise I'd made on the flight, and listened to the house's silence, a deeper, older quiet than the condos, a quiet that felt like Marriott's. I phoned her the next evening and asked if she'd come over Saturday, bring a bottle, because we needed a proper talk. She paused before answering, then said, "Are you okay?" I told her I would be by then. She arrived Saturday with a bottle of Powers and takeout from the Indian place on Lower Glanmire Road. We ate at the kitchen table, and I laid it all out, from the 4 a.m. laptop discovery to Joy's note in seat 34A. No softening, no omissions. The Euro 34,000 figure left my lips for the first time since scribbling it in my notebook. I told her about Christian Filipina, the rosary, the condo, the diabetes, the tuition, the house, the trike, the wedding sponsorship, everything. I told her about the bank calling. About checking Joy's phone. And about the shame I carried for that last part. Awifa listened without a word. When I finished, she sat there for a full minute, fingers wrapped around her glass, then finally said, "You blew half of Mam's house on a gilt shop." I admitted it. "Yeah. I did, love." She didn't raise her voice. In some ways, that would have been simpler. She fell silent, placed her drink on the table, and said, "You never called. Not once in over a year. You never picked up the phone to tell me what was going on." Then she grabbed her jacket and walked out. After that, she barely spoke to me for 2 months, just the occasional message about bills or errands, nothing more. Connor found out from her when she was in Brisbane and phoned me a few weeks later. His tone was cooler, more confused than furious. "What the hell were you thinking?" he asked. "What were you even doing?" I told him I didn't know, that I'd been lonely, that I'd handled it all wrong. He just said, "Yeah, well, don't let it happen again." Australians tend to be straightforward like that. The thing that stuck with her, the thing she brought up when she finally agreed to talk again, over a second whiskey on a damp Tuesday in February, was that I'd never said a word. She insisted I portray Joy as the antagonist, craving a clear-cut act of treachery to despise. But I refused, there was no such thing to give. She scoffed, obviously, I'm asking for a tale where something terrible befalls you, and instead, you're just telling me about yourself." And I replied, "Exactly. That's the point. That's what haunts me." She wasn't entirely off base. Joy and I still keep in contact. She's been sending me messages on Messenger every few weeks, always brief. A picture of the completed house, with Nane outside by the sari stall, holding up a shampoo sachet like it's some kind of prize. Another of Cherry May in her crisp nursing student uniform, the school emblem on her pocket, grinning at the camera, looking barely older than a child. One of Tate, still alive back then, his foot propped up in the new armchair in the new living room, waving. She never asks for anything in any of them, she never has. I respond maybe half the time, keeping it simple, "He looks good. Tell her I'm proud. Glad the rains haven't been as bad this year." I don't send money. Not a single euro since the morning I left. That choice was made in the Doha terminal, and I've stuck to it, though it hasn't always been easy. There have been 2 real crises since I returned. A typhoon ripped the roof off Marit's place in Cebu, and Tate ended up in the hospital last October. I found out about both through the family Facebook group I never fully left. Neither time did Joy ask for help. Neither time did I step in. The roof got repaired by a cousin in Manila who works in construction. Tate was home after 4 days. Things carried on without my financial support. That was an important lesson. Here's what I'm up to these days, because I don't want you walking away thinking this is the end of the story. The first change was cutting back on the drink, not quitting entirely, but no more midday whiskey. I'll still share a beer with Donald when he visits from Limerick, but the half bottles of Powers at 4 in the afternoon are gone. I've taken up walking, too. There's a trail from the cove along the cliffs above the harbor where you can spot the cruise terminal, the old emigrant pier, and on a good day, even Roche's Point in the distance. I make that walk 3 or 4 times a week, slow going with these knees, but I keep at it. I'm seeing a grief counselor now, a woman named Dr. Hennessy with an office above a pharmacy on South Mall. Should have gone 2 years ago instead of falling down that Christian Filipina rabbit hole. That's one of the things I've told her, and she's been kind enough not to make me feel like a fool for it. Mostly, we talk about Marriott, about being away when she passed, about missing the funeral, about the kettle still warm when I got home. Joy's a separate conversation, one I might be ready for in another year or so. Aisling speaking to me again. We spent Christmas together, her, Ewan, and the kids. She cooked the meal in Carrigaline because I wasn't trusted near a turkey yet. Put a Brussels sprout on my plate without asking, and I ate it. She told me, "God, you must be drowning in guilt," and for the first time since I'd returned, we both cracked up. Little moments like that, they're how you find your way back. Will I go back to the Philippines? I've considered it. I'm not ruling it out, but if I do, it'll be on my own terms. A set monthly sum, put in writing, can you imagine? An old engineer insisting on paperwork. 3, maybe 400 euros a month, not a cent more. No construction projects, no school fees, no renovations, no sudden crises. Just a friendship, if she's open to it on those terms. Maybe a long visit, not a permanent move. And if she can't, or won't, accept that, then I'll have my answer. A clear one. The takeaway from a 55-year-old sailor from Cork, knees shot, with a notebook full of mobile money receipts. Simple. $2,000 a month, or in my case, around 1,800 euros, will cover the basics in the Philippines. A decent condo, good food, Sunday mass, and a cold beer on the balcony at dusk. That much is real. The YouTube clips aren't completely wrong about that. No one mentions that $2,000 a month won't stretch far enough, not for her, her parents, her ailing father, her ambitious sister, her unemployed brother, her 2 nephews, her nieces, her aunt with failing eyesight, or her cousin recovering from dengue. It simply doesn't add up. And if she's a devoted Filipina, let me be clear, Joy was one, and she still is, she won't prioritize you over them. In her eyes, that's not a decision a moral person makes. The oldest daughter doesn't walk away from her family for a foreigner's modest savings. That's not how things work. So the deception isn't always intentional. Sometimes, there's no deception at all. Sometimes it's just two good people meeting across a gap that the budget will not cover. And the man who walks into that with a $500,000 pension thinking he's going to be a king is the same fool I was. Sat at the kitchen table in Glanmire at 11:30 at night with 3 whiskeys and a YouTube algorithm. I don't regret loving her. I want to say that as the last thing on my own ledger. I genuinely don't. I regret pretending the maths would work. I regret lying to my daughter for 15 months. I regret being absent to my own family for 32 years and then trying to pay for the absence with another family that wasn't mine. Those are the regrets. Happiness isn't part of the equation. That's the long and short of it, folks. Take care out there. Meet Brendan O'Sullivan, 55, living in Glanmire, pacing the cliffs near Cove and gradually piecing his life back together. I should be upfront about why we're running this piece on Inside the Philippines. It's not our typical fare. No scams, no double lives, no missing money. From everything Brendan shared, the woman in his story was simply someone trying her hardest for a family that relied on her. The builder wasn't a crook. The school fees were covered. The older sibling is studying to become a nurse. Their dad is still around. By all the standard fraud checks we apply here, Brendan didn't fall for a con. Yet he returned with barely half his savings left. This is the side of the story we rarely discuss, the one many of you might be stepping into right now. Not a trick, not a trap, but a gradual, well-intentioned pull from a close-knit, deeply religious family. It drains about €34,000 in just over a year, and it comes from within the culture itself, not out of malice, but simply because that's how things work there. That's the role the firstborn daughter plays. So if you're watching this with the same algorithm Brendan had, sunny beach clips, clinking cocktail glasses, the lure of $2,000 a month, do what he didn't do soon enough. Grab a notebook. Examine the raw figures closely, not for your own sake, but for hers and her family's. When you grow attached to someone from the Philippines, you aren't just committing to an individual, you're stepping into a home, a neighborhood, a whole region. Determine your true financial boundary each month. Consider whether you can refuse when the late-night call about dengue fever arrives, because it will happen, and it won't always be exaggerated. Be honest with yourself, can you really turn away, knowing who you are and why you were scrolling through that video in the first place? If this resonated with you, stay connected, subscribe, leave a comment, or share your own experience if you have one. Up next, we'll talk to a man from Manchester who planned to retire in Dumaguete but wound up managing a bakery he never asked for in a town he still can't say right. Trust us, you'll want to hear this. Straight from the Philippines, take care out there. We look forward to catching up with you again soon.